On August 14, 2005, the skies over Athens, Greece, witnessed something chilling, something that would later be called the ghost plane. A passenger jet, flying high above at 34,000 feet, wasn't responding to air traffic controllers. For over 2 hours, it circled silently, ignoring every single radio call. Was it a hijacking, a terrorist attack, or something far more mysterious? What the Greek Air Force discovered that day still haunts aviation history. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe for more true mystery and disaster stories. And let's begin. It was a summer morning at Larnaca Airport, Cyprus. Helios Airways Flight 522 was preparing to fly to Prague with a stopover in Athens. On board were 115 passengers and 6 crew members. Most of them were families and vacationers heading to Greece. The captain was a 59-year-old veteran pilot with over 17,000 flight hours, assisted by a 51-year-old first officer with more than 7,000 hours of experience. Both had flown together many times, but their working relationship wasn't smooth. The first officer had often complained about the captain's harsh behavior, something the airline already knew about. The aircraft was a Boeing 737-300, about 7 years old. At first, everything seemed normal. The plane took off without problems, and the crew contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control as they climbed. They requested clearance to cruise at 34,000 feet, which was approved. But as the jet climbed past 12,000 feet, an alarm suddenly blared inside the cockpit. This alarm normally rang on the ground if the aircraft wasn't properly configured for takeoff. But here it was, ringing while the plane was already in the air. The captain immediately contacted the airline's operations center, reporting 2 issues. A takeoff configuration warning, cooling system lights showing off. He asked where the circuit breakers for the system were located. The ground engineer replied that the lights were supposed to be off, and that the breakers were behind the captain's seat. The captain insisted they weren't, confusing the engineer. Then the engineer remembered something important. The night before, he had performed a pressurization check on this very aircraft. To do so, he had switched the pressurization control from auto to manual. And after finishing the test, he had forgotten to switch it back. He asked the captain if the pressurization mode was set to auto, but the captain didn't respond to the question. Instead, he repeated his own query about the circuit breakers. While this back and forth was happening, oxygen masks suddenly dropped inside the passenger cabin. Passengers were struggling to breathe, but the crew didn't notice, or maybe they didn't recognize the danger, and then contact with the plane was lost. For the next 2 hours, the Boeing 737 continued flying on autopilot. It climbed to 34,000 feet, completely unresponsive to radio calls. Air traffic controllers tried again and again, using normal frequencies, emergency channels, and even asking nearby planes to relay messages. But there was nothing. Silence. When the aircraft entered Greek airspace without permission, the Greek Air Force scrambled 2 F-16 fighter jets to intercept it. At around 8:30 a.m., the fighters reached the silent jet. What they saw was terrifying. Through the cockpit window, they noticed the captain's seat was empty. The first officer was slumped over the controls, unresponsive. In the cabin, passengers sat motionless in their seats, oxygen masks dangling from their faces. No one moved. Then, something shocking happened. As the plane circled Athens in a holding pattern, a man suddenly appeared in the cockpit. He was not one of the pilots. Instead, he was a flight attendant named Andreas Prodromou. Andreas held a commercial pilot license, but he wasn't trained to fly a Boeing 737. Still, he had survived longer than everyone else because he managed to use a portable oxygen tank. The F-16 pilots signaled to him, and he even waved back. For a brief moment, there was hope. But almost immediately, one of the 737's engines flamed out. It had run out of fuel. The plane banked sharply to the left. Minutes later, the second engine failed as well. The jet descended rapidly, spiraling out of control. At 9:00 a.m., Helios Airways Flight 522 slammed into the hills north of Athens. All 121 people on board were killed. The investigators quickly determined the cause. The pressurization control had been left in manual mode after the maintenance check the night before. Because of this, as the plane climbed, the cabin never pressurized. At high altitudes, the air is too thin to breathe. Within minutes, passengers and crew began suffering from hypoxia, a condition where the brain is starved of oxygen. Symptoms include confusion, poor judgment, and eventually unconsciousness. The pilots misinterpreted the warning alarm as a takeoff configuration problem, not a pressurization issue. By the time oxygen masks deployed, the pilots were already too impaired by hypoxia to respond properly. They lost consciousness, and eventually so did nearly everyone else on board. Andreas, the flight attendant, managed to stay awake longer using portable oxygen. But without full training on the Boeing 737, and with the engines shutting down from fuel exhaustion, there was nothing he could do to save the aircraft. Aftermath. This disaster shook the aviation world. The Helios Airways crash highlighted serious gaps in pilot training and warning system design. Boeing was later required to improve cockpit warning signals so that pressurization alarms couldn't be confused with takeoff warnings. Airlines also updated crew training, emphasizing the dangers of hypoxia and the importance of properly checking pressurization systems before takeoff. Since then, no accident exactly like Helios Flight 522 has ever happened again. But the haunting story of the ghost plane serves as a reminder of how a single overlooked switch, and just a few minutes without oxygen, can doom an entire flight. So, what do you think about this mysterious and tragic case? Do you believe Andreas could have saved the plane if he had been fully trained on the 737? Or was this disaster truly unavoidable? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story chilling, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another deep dive into aviation mysteries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.